Have you ever noticed there's something different about you? While most people rush to show every step on their feed, you don't feel the need. You don't beg for attention. You don't turn every moment into an announcement. You stay in the background, quiet, almost invisible. And that's where the mystery lies. Why does someone who doesn't show up all the time seem to carry such a strange, even intimidating power? Few people understand the hidden secret behind this. It's not shyness, and it's definitely not indifference. It's as if your calm is a silent rebellion in a world addicted to noise and desperate for attention at any cost. Maybe you've felt it yourself, that peace of not having to prove anything, of simply being present without putting yourself on display. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. Because being low profile isn't about disappearing, it's about living with depth. It's a rare psychological strength that transforms the way you see yourself and the way the world reacts to you. Silence can be far more powerful than any performance. And today you might finally discover why. Carl Jung once said that most people spend their lives trapped in the persona, the mask we wear to survive in society. Online, this mask became the norm, a digital costume we polish, filter, and present to the world. But choosing silence, choosing to step away from that constant display, is like stepping outside the theater. It's not just rebellion, it's integration. It's you saying, I don't need to play this role to exist. Jung would call this the peace of the shadow. The shadow isn't darkness in the sense of evil, but the part of you that doesn't perform, the raw, authentic side that doesn't crave applause. When you stop living only through the persona, the shadow isn't hidden anymore. It becomes a source of strength. And that's why your silence isn't emptiness. It's coherence. It's proof that you've made peace with who you are without needing to be constantly validated. Think about it. A digital persona is fragile. It needs constant attention, constant polishing, constant approval. But when you're grounded in the shadow, you don't have to maintain a performance. You act from conviction, not from insecurity. That's why your presence feels different. It's not about volume, it's about depth. The mask impresses for a moment. The integrated self resonates forever. Jung saw the figure of the wise man or the hermit as an archetype. Someone who inspires not by noise but by presence. And when you choose to be low profile, you're activating that archetype in a modern world addicted to spectacle. Your calmness, your refusal to perform, speaks louder than any carefully crafted image. It unsettles people because they can't control or predict someone who doesn't need their approval. Look at the difference. One person posts every detail of their life, hoping to feel seen. Another lives quietly, not out of fear but out of alignment. The first survives in fragments of applause. The second exists in wholeness. One is dependent, the other is free. This is not about invisibility, it's about solidity. Silence, in this sense, becomes not a lack but a declaration. And that's the real paradox. In a culture where everyone is busy performing, the one who refuses the stage ends up carrying the most power. Because once you've broken with the collective persona, you step into a presence that's harder to ignore than any shout. But if that's the case, then a new question emerges. How do you protect this power in a world that constantly tries to pull you back onto the stage? Have you noticed how privacy nowadays feels almost like a luxury? It's as if keeping something just for yourself is strange, when in fact it's one of the rarest emotional resources we've got. People who choose not to put everything out there understand the value of protecting what's sacred. It's not about hiding, it's about preserving. Because anything that's shown too much loses its essence, loses its power. It's like a flame. It only keeps burning if you shield it from the wind. Here's the thing. Once you learn to protect your energy, you realize you don't have to live stuck in that endless loop of social comparison anymore. While so many people drown in perfect feeds, constantly feeling like they're behind, you begin to build real self-esteem that doesn't depend on numbers. That choice becomes almost like an antidote to digital anxiety. You don't measure yourself by what others post, but by what you actually grow inside. Think about it this way. While most people are running on a treadmill of likes, exhausted and going nowhere, you're walking calmly on a quiet trail. The noise fades into the background, and what you hear is your own breath, your own truth. The treadmill might look impressive, it shows effort, but it leads nowhere. The trail may look slower, but it takes you exactly where you need to go. That's the difference between exposure and purpose. In practice, it means saying no to constant exposure and yes to real presence. You get to choose moments that actually matter, not every detail just to prove you exist. A family dinner that stays only in memory. A trip where you don't record every second. A personal win that you share only with those who truly matter. Those healthy boundaries are like invisible walls that protect your emotional space. I've lived the opposite extreme myself, oversharing and feeling like my life was being consumed by everyone else, until I realized that keeping part of my story just for me was freeing. That shift didn't just give me peace, it gave me back the energy to focus on what truly mattered. It's like watering a plant. If you pour everything out, it dries up. If you keep and care for it, it blooms. And maybe that's why low-profile people seem to carry a different kind of aura. Because while others burn themselves out trying to keep up with the endless race of exposure, you've learned to save your energy for your own path. And in that choice to protect what's intimate lies a silent kind of power. If you've ever felt like you don't need to show everything, hit subscribe. Because the next step is understanding how this lifestyle changes the way you see yourself and the way the world sees you. Doesn't it seem like nowadays no emotion is allowed to stay private? Joy has to become a story. Sadness needs a dramatic caption. Anger turns into a long rant. But low-key people don't live at that speed. They don't turn every feeling into a performance. And that's exactly where the difference lies. They create inner space to feel, to process, and then to decide what to do with it. That pause is rare. But man, it's powerful. When you don't have to put everything on display, you discover your own rhythm for dealing with emotions. It's not about swallowing feelings, it's about not outsourcing each one to other people's judgment. Low-profile folks get that not everything has to be translated into likes or comments. That kind of emotional regulation brings balance, because it lets you feel without rushing, reflect without an audience, and grow without pressure. It's almost like taking a deep breath in a world that's always out of breath. And that's where real presence is born. While so many are obsessed with the perfect photo, you learn to just be in the moment. It's the difference between watching a sunset and getting lost in the colors of the sky, or spending minutes adjusting angles to post on Instagram. One lives the experience, the other lives for the reaction. One walks away with peace, the other walks away with anxiety. Seems small, but that detail completely changes the quality of your life. Think of something simple like a family dinner without phones on the table. Ever realized how rare that's become? These days, almost every meal is interrupted by the glow of a screen. But when you allow yourself to be fully there, something magical happens. Conversations go deeper, time feels slower, and you notice details that digital rush always steals from you. That genuine presence creates memories no picture could ever capture. This choice also strengthens bonds. When you look someone in the eye and really listen, you're giving them something no like will ever match. Full attention. And it's that kind of attention that builds lasting connections. Low-key people carry that secret. Instead of spreading energy thin to please everyone, they focus their presence where it matters. It's not about the number of interactions, it's about the quality of relationships. And that creates an emotional well-being the digital world just can't replicate. And maybe that's why there's such a quiet peace in people who live this way. Not because life is perfect, but because the way they deal with it is different. While others are prisoners of outside reactions, you learn to live just to truly feel. But here's the catch. This kind of emotional regulation, this power of being present, opens the door to something even deeper, breaking free from the emptiness of shallow connections that, no matter how loud, never really fill you up. Have you noticed how most people burn through their energy trying to control how they're seen? It's like they're constantly editing their own image, worried about every little detail of their social performance. But the harder you try to please, the further you drift from who you really are. Low-profile people figured out something freeing. You can't control someone else's gaze, but you can choose to be authentic. And when you stop worrying so much about being seen, you finally start to see yourself. That choice opens the door to a different kind of relationship. Instead of collecting shallow acquaintances, you begin to value real bonds. It's like the difference between a glass full of soda, sweet but empty of nutrients, and a glass of fresh water. Simple, but it actually quenches your thirst. You don't need 100 contacts to feel complete. Just a handful of people who really know your silence and respect your essence. Jung said that low-profile folks embody the archetype of the sage or the hermit, not because they isolate out of weakness, but because they carry a silent presence that inspires. It's the kind of person who doesn't need many words to earn respect. Their strength isn't in noise, but in consistency. Silence isn't absence, it's coherence. And this archetype always has a strange effect. It builds trust in those who seek depth, but it makes people who live on appearances feel uncomfortable. In practice, it means not turning every encounter into a performance. You don't need to worry about being in the right angle in a conversation, or if your life looks interesting enough for Instagram. Your freedom lies in not measuring your gestures by someone else's eyes, but by your own truth. A coffee with a friend can simply be that, coffee and presence. No records, no filters, no anxiety about how it'll look to others. I felt that difference myself when I noticed that the people who weren't trying to prove anything ended up being the most inspiring. While some wear themselves out trying to show they matter, others simply live, and it's their authenticity that draws people in. It's like being in a room with someone who doesn't need to shout to be heard. Their calm presence speaks louder than any rehearsed speech. You ever felt that? The power of someone who doesn't pretend, but just is? At the end of the day, the silence of these people is coherence, and their presence is quality. They're not interested in pleasing the crowd, but in living in alignment with what they believe. That freedom from public image is rare, but it's powerful. Still, it raises an important question. What happens when you realize that even with authenticity, the world around you keeps pushing you into shallow connections? Doesn't it seem like the digital era has given rise to a kind of collective character everyone plays? Everyone's learned, almost without realizing it, to present a polished, edited version of themselves, ready for applause. But living only through the persona means living half a life. Being low profile is exactly a break from that collective mask. It's a silent act of rebellion, refusing to be just a character so you can become whole again. And that choice alone, it's revolutionary. Jung said the shadow isn't an enemy, but a forgotten part of us that needs to be integrated. When you stop obsessing over self-image, you start looking inward and realize there's more life in silence than in noise. A low-profile person isn't someone running from the world, but someone choosing not to be swallowed by its superficiality. Integration is the key, shifting from being just an image to reclaiming your essence. In that process, the archetype that comes alive is the sage or the hermit. Not the hermit as an escape from life, but as someone who finds meaning in inner retreat. Have you ever felt that need to step back from all the noise just to hear your own voice again? That's what we're talking about. This archetype doesn't need a stage because its authority comes from experience, not performance. And that's why, paradoxically, silence ends up inspiring more than the loudest shout. Think about the difference between someone obsessed with their own image and someone who lives with depth. The first spends all their energy trying to control how they're perceived, but never finds peace. The second is busy actually living, and their authenticity shows without effort. Have you ever met someone like that? A person who doesn't post, doesn't show off, but the moment they speak, everyone stops to listen. That's the power of someone who's integrated both shadow and persona. What's fascinating is that being low profile doesn't mean disappearing. It means living in depth. It's not invisibility, it's consistency. Like the roots of a tree, you don't see them, but they're what hold the whole crown in place. That's real freedom. Living without carrying the weight of a mask all the time. You don't stop existing when you're not seen. On the contrary, you start existing in a more solid way, because you're no longer dependent on someone else's gaze to be who you are. And maybe that's why so many people feel uneasy around those who live like this. Silence feels unsettling in a world addicted to spectacle. But if you look closely, you'll see it. The low-profile person shows us it's possible to live without rushing, without competing, without shouting. It's almost like an invitation to a new way of being in the world. And the big question that follows is this: if such depth exists, how does it transform the connections you build with others? At the end of the day, being low profile isn't the absence of life. It's life lived with intensity and silence. It's the courage to choose depth in a world that worships the surface. And once you understand that, you realize silence isn't emptiness. It's presence. It's your way of saying that your peace is worth more than any stage. When you're at peace with who you really are, you don't feel the need to prove anything to anyone. That's real freedom. Not depending on someone else's gaze, but living from the inside out. And maybe, deep down, you've always longed for that, a lighter, more authentic life, without the pressure of putting yourself on display every step of the way. And if that desire already lives in you, maybe it's time to claim it. Because the silence you carry isn't weakness, it's strength. It's a rare choice, one that few will ever understand, but it can completely transform how you see yourself and how you connect with the world around you. If this video resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe so we can keep walking this journey together. And drop our secret phrase in the comments: I choose silence. That'll be our code of strength, a reminder that you don't need a stage to have presence.